Hey, Jay, we hit 1,000 subscribers on our newsletter yet?
We are pretty close. I think we're like 920. If we can get to 1,000 subscribers, we need like 80 more. Whoever's the 1,000th subscriber to dredaily.com, our daily economics newsletter, I'm going to send them an engraved with their name drunk real estate mug. And I think we've only given out like 4 of these in total.
Yeah, we do that, though. They got to share it on social media and tag us.
Perfect. Yeah.
I got one.
There it is right there.
Welcome to Drunk Real Estate. Grab a drink and enjoy the show.
Hey now, this is Ashley Wilson, also known as Kyle Wilson's wife, and this is Drunk Real Estate. I'm here with my amazing co-hosts, Jay Scott, AJ Osborne, and Mauricio Raul. Jay, how are you doing?
Wow, that sounded really like, loosen up. Come on, this is fun.
I got to drink more.
So much
Drink
better.
more. You got to drink.
I still don't understand why Jay always goes first. No matter who introduces in the family, Jay's going first, which I don't know why.
Kyle told me to say Jay first, so I think you have to take it up with him.
I am doing well. I am excited. Kyle is not here. I think this is the first time Kyle has missed the podcast. I think he has pneumonia. Is that right, Ash?
Unfortunately, yes, but fortunately for everyone watching, yes.
So we get the amazing Ashley Wilson this week. So I'm super happy. I am drinking again. I am drinking. It's called the Assist. It's a cab from Napa, and I figure I'm going to be taking over some of the moderating duties this week. So I'm getting the Assist.
Quick question: is that from Costco? A Costco special or no?
This is not. This was a gift, and it's not very good. So whoever gave it to me, it was not a good gift, but I don't remember who gave it to me. So hopefully they don't either. Just being honest. It's not to my liking. Oh, okay. So am I taking over at this point?
That's what I was told would happen.
Okay. So, well, we are here this week with an amazing guest. Thanks to Kyle eating unhealthy and not getting enough exercise and getting really sick. So this week we get the amazing Ashley Wilson, Kyle Wilson's wife, my business partner at Bar Down Investments and Department Addicts. Ashley, welcome. Thanks for being here.
And Conference Connect. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad that it is taken, a year to have me on the show. I finally poisoned Kyle enough that it added up to pneumonia. And I am drinking the lovely Clase Azul.
Nice bottle. Can you tap the top for us?
Yes, I can. Kyle told me that I'm supposed to do this.
Nice.
Wow.
Excellent.
Just really classing up the joint.
Okay. In addition, we have, I'm going to go to AJ Osborne. How's it going, AJ?
It's going good, buddy. Got my Mauricio. I got my red plastic cup here.
Love it. Love it.
Filled with Diet Coke because I am everyone's favorite designated driver.
AJ just got back from my hometown, just outside of Washington, D.C., and I heard you hit the Natural History Museum, the American History Museum. You missed the Air and Space Museum. If you're going to go to the Smithsonian, you got to make some time for Air and Space, but natural history, I agree with you, is the best.
You also missed calling Kyle and I because we're only 2.5 hours away. That would have been a day trip for us, AJ, but
Kyle
thanks for that.
Kyle,
What?
Take it up with him. I was there for like 2 days. And so he's like, oh, if you were here for more time.
Mauricio, what is going on? You've got a big day today, the day that this podcast gets released. What's going on?
Yep, I'm launching my new syndication legal coaching program to my beta group. I'm super pumped. It's going to be amazing. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also excited that we are officially over with, not excited, but we very proud that we're done with our Nutcracker season. My daughter just crushed it in Nutcracker this weekend. 4 shows, back to back. Amazing. Picked up my little Nutcracker over here, as you can tell. I'm in the spirit, my little Nutcracker. But yeah, it's been a good week. My voice is almost back. I'm not 100%. I lost it last Monday. But yeah, really excited about tomorrow, man. Just putting a lot of work into this amazing new coaching program I did.
Excellent. Well, hopefully you'll give us a link and we'll throw that in the YouTube description for anybody that wants more information.
Congrats, man.
Look, I'm
Yeah,
pumped.
congrats,
It's gonna rock.
Mauricio.
I'm so excited. I'm so pumped.
It's going to be awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so without Kyle here, I guess I'm the moderator and I'm doing the first segment, so I get to introduce myself. And I'm going to make it quick. We're doing an economic update. We haven't done an economic update in a few weeks. And honestly, there has not been that much of a change in the economy. That said, a lot of people think there's been a change in the economy. If you ask a lot of Americans, things are now suddenly a whole lot better than they were a month ago. If you ask other Americans, things are a whole lot worse than they were a month ago. And basically, we've talked about this on the show before. I'm going to share this fun little slide here. But what we've talked about before is essentially that politics trumps economics most of the time. Basically, people will tell you that their view of the economy is very coincident with who is in office. And so this cool little graphic, for those that aren't looking at this, basically what it shows is every time we have an incumbent lose and we have a new president from the other party come into power, basically by inauguration day, half the country has decided that the economy is much worse than it was, and the other half of the country decides that the economy is much better than it was, depending on whether their party lost the executive branch or their party gained the executive branch. And basically, we're seeing the same thing these days. According to a recent Gallup poll, we've seen now an 11-point swing in the favorability that Republicans have towards the economy. It's a bit less than 11 points, but Democrats are feeling like the economy is worse. And I'm not talking about feeling like the future of the economy is better or worse. I'm talking about people saying today the economy is better or worse than it was a month ago, which is more crazy because if you look at the data, and we'll talk a little about the data, but if you look at the data, we have not seen much change in the last few months. So we got inflation data today. We got CPI data today. This was probably the biggest change. It didn't take anybody by surprise. It was expected, but inflation was a little bit up in November, basically ticked up to about 2.7% annualized, 3.3% on the core. So if you subtract out energy and shelter, so inflation was up a little bit, but I don't think anybody was really surprised about that. I think that was expected. Any thoughts on inflation going up? I mean, we have a Fed meeting next week, and we're going to talk about other data points. But in the midst of this whole discussion, we should be thinking about the fact that the Fed next week has to decide if they're going to cut rates again. According to the market, there is a 98% chance that they're going to cut rates again. I'll throw up this graphic real quick, but this is basically the investors' sentiment towards what's going to happen next week. 98.6% chance of a rate cut. So despite the fact that inflation is up a little bit, despite the fact that most of the other economic metrics are pretty stable, there's no reason to believe that that we need to spur the economy on. It looks like the market is predicting almost a certainty that we're going to see a quarter point cut next week. In January, that drops off considerably, basically 80% chance of no cut in January. So the consensus right now is that despite inflation ramping up a tiny bit, despite jobs being pretty steady, despite holiday spending, which we'll talk about being pretty strong, looks like we're going to have a quarter point rate cut next week. Anybody disagree?
No, I think the move was already built in. So the numbers coming out, like if you remember last year, the end when they announced it, the announcement had an immediate effect, and it was not a good one. Like they announced it, and everything just went crazy. Like it was, and then they backtracked off it, right? And so I think they've announced it, and there's been no change. So markets have priced it in. And I think that will show them, or has shown them, that they can go ahead with it, and nothing's coming off the bus. So I think they will this one. But I agree. I think that's the path they set forward. They're going to do it. I think it's going to be a whole nother story, though, as the new administration comes in and what they're doing. And I think the Fed is going to be looking at that saying this is going to be a different landscape. And so how they move forward is going to be really predicated by those actions.
I agree with both of you. I just wonder if core PCE has flatlined, why should the Fed be cutting in the first place?
Yeah, that's a big question. A lot of people are asking. Like, we're pretty much status quo right now. It looks like even if we're not at the neutral rate, we're not seeing inflation start to come down, and so there are a lot of people saying that this cut next week isn't a certainty or shouldn't be a certainty. And then there are plenty more people that are saying we're almost certain to get a cut next week, but at that point, things are going to kind of get cut off and we're not going to see cuts going into next year. So I'm starting to hear all that talk of rates higher for longer again, stuff that we haven't heard in about a year now.
I've been on the whole train for a long time. And, me and Kyle have gone out this, which Kyle was 100% right about the jobs, which I agreed with him on, right? That he was stating basically for a year, the jobs numbers were so over exaggerated, which 100%. In fact, it was not only that they were over exaggerated, but also the source. 50% of them came from the government. And so the argument was, though, because that, we should cut rates. And I've been more of the stickler actually for the last year and a half that I'm like, it is only good for us. On the Zoom, it is only good for us, rates getting cut. It just is. But I'm very nervous about that because the money in the system is gone. It's still there. It's still sitting there. So people are like, well, you can do this, but we've already seen we're much more sensitive to it. And the last thing that I want to happen is they do it too soon and then they course correct. That would be the most damaging thing ever. If they came back and said, we're course correcting and we're going to raise interest rates, that would take a whole year out. Like it would just, that would be so damaging. So I really get nervous about the effects if it's not ready for it, because it's like throwing a match on gas. And if the market reacts in a certain way, them course correcting and going the other direction, I think that's far worse.
And don't forget, I mean, we've been talking about this for a while, but I don't think it's anywhere near out of the cards that the Fed does have to pivot and start raising rates because, I mean, I've been talking for a couple of years now that, inflation doesn't go up and down. So we've been now, after inflation hit, whatever it hit 9% a couple of years ago, we've been in sort of this disinflationary environment where it's coming all the way down. But again, we've thrown up that chart before, the 1940s, I think it was, where over a decade, you'll see that things spike up to 9%, then it'll go down to close to 3 or 2, then it goes back up again or whatever, and then it goes back down. I mean, throughout the decade, it's going to go up and down. Jay, you and I have a bet, and I forgot what it was or what the consequences were. But I mean, the question is, are we going to get back? In my opinion, by the end of the decade, are we going to get back to those all-time highs of 9%? Are we going to approach that? I think that was our bet. And I think what you're seeing now with Trump coming in office, I mean, we all agree that all of his policies are very inflationary. The tariffs, whether he pulls them off or not, I don't know. But if he does do the thing with the tariffs and does all that stuff, that is very inflationary. I think we all agree on that. So I would expect inflation to start ticking up again, not because the Fed is cutting or whatever. It's just, to AJ's point, there's still a lot of money in the system. Now you've got all these cuts or tariffs and everything, and the asset prices are going to go through the roof. So I don't know. I that's the one thing I'd be concerned about is I'm expecting inflation to continue to go up, and then it'll come back down, and they'll go back up. And again, it's not a straight line one way or another. I don't think we should be thinking of inflation went all the way up to 9. Now it's going to come down all the way to 2, and then we're going to flatline. That's just not how it works.
Here's an interesting way to think about it. We often talk about like the minutia of the data. We're looking at inflation to see should we be raising or lowering rates. We look at jobs to see if we should be raising or lowering rates. And these are things we measure on in terms of jobs on a weekly basis, in terms of inflation, a monthly basis. But there's a much broader measure of how the economy is doing, and that's GDP, just the output of the economy. And I think if you would have asked anybody 3 years ago if raising interest rates from 0 to 5.25% was going to have a negative impact on the economy in general, basically the broader GDP numbers, I think everybody would have said, yeah, we're going to see a softer economy. But the reality is over the last couple of years, GDP has continued to be strong. It continues to be strong now. And if we lower interest rates now, I'm not sure we're going to get a whole lot more benefit from it, but there's certainly a lot of risk and downside potentially if we start to see inflation.
This comes back to my main argument, and I've had this argument forever. We have two different economies, Main Street and the federal government. The money is coming from the Fed. You cannot get rid of inflation with high interest rates when the federal government is pumping $4 trillion every 8 months into the system. So they're trying to get in the private sector. They are actively affecting the money supply, while the federal government is actively pumping trillions of dollars into the system. This is a horrible situation because you have Main Street that is suffering. Hence the reason we had a populist movement for a populist president, because Main Street's suffering. I mean, look at what's going on with everything. Yet you look at the numbers and it's like there's a disconnect.
Well, let's talk about that, because I'm not sure that there is as much of a disconnect there as we talk about. Look at holiday shopping. If you look at Black Friday and Black Friday weekend shopping, basically we broke all records this year. Yeah, in-store brick and mortar was down a little bit, but it was much, much made up for by a spike in online shopping. Now, we have to temper it a little bit. Apparently, a lot of that was spending on things like durable goods, like appliances, where people are concerned that we may see rising prices next year. So they're buying stuff when it's on sale as opposed to gifts. But we saw a ridiculous amount of spending over the holiday season this year. In addition, if you look at credit numbers, if you look at consumer credit numbers, what we saw was that last month, basically we saw consumer credit surging by $20 billion, which it was $3 billion the month before. That's the highest we've seen in about 3 years. So people are spending money on credit cards. So people don't necessarily feel broke. They're spending ridiculous amounts of money. Not saying they have that money, but they must feel like they have that money.
Exactly. Because the consumer spending is down to 4%. Outside the COVID debacle, we haven't seen that since 2008. So when you start to look at how much money they actually have in spending, they're moving it towards credit cards. They may not have the money, they may be spending it, but they're complaining about it. So they don't want to change their attitude, and we don't want to stop the spending, but we've moved it into credit cards, and we can't afford like a lot of the basics. But you're right, they're still spending, but how they spend it has changed dramatically.
I want to hear what hip hop Ashley has to say about this, because for those that aren't watching this, those that are listening, you didn't see that Ashley did this Britney Spears middle of the concert quick change into like a tank top and a backwards hat. So I like the look there, Ash.
You weren't supposed to reveal it because I thought there was a whole thing about at what time did Kyle change his hat. So that's what I was trying to achieve here. But spoiler alert, it's now. Ultimately, I think the bottom line is first of all, we're at the highest of consumer debt when you look at credit card balances. But in addition to that, I think it's an issue with what's the narrative? What's the narrative of the mainstream media? And when you look at, for example, the jobs report, where the jobs report is speaking about unemployment rate at 4.2%, oh, that's not as bad because it was expected to be at 4.1%. The reality of the situation, it was almost 4.3%. In fact, it was only 6,700 people away from 4.3%, which tells a different story. So right now, when you look at these data points and realize that last year at the same time, we had 1 million people less who were unemployed, and part-time jobs being a huge contributor to the jobs report. What is the number one indicator when we're going into a recessionary period? More part-time jobs. You have a lot of employers switch from full-time openings to part-time openings. You also have people take part-time positions because it's the only thing they can achieve. So I think when we just dive into the data a little bit more and dissect this information to a different level, I think we see that there's more exposure than maybe mainstream media is wanting us to realize. And maybe that's the time of year, right? The time of year is we kind of need this consumer spending during this holiday season to carry us through. Maybe to AJ's point, it's more politically motivated and tying into who's in office and who's coming up next. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that could be behind the narrative, but ultimately, I know, Jay, you actually said this years ago and it really impacted me, is it doesn't matter what the data says, it matters what people believe and how they act ultimately. So it doesn't matter whether or not we're in a recession by looking at data, it matters whether or not people act as if we're in a recession. And I think right now, when you turn on the TV, which a lot of Americans are doing right now at this time of year, and they're seeing this, I would say potentially positive spin on this jobs report is not necessarily a good thing.
Can I just add one thing? Because I was trying to pull up the stats, but I mean, I think we've also mentioned this, but with this movement now, and again, I don't know how effective this Doge government waste cutback thing is going to work out to be, but there's been a lot of government jobs, to your point, AJ, that have been added.
50%.
50% between healthcare and the government. The government added 33,000 jobs, and the healthcare, I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but
even in the last 4 years, like I'm just looking at last year, we added about 709,000 government jobs. I don't know what it's going to be this year, but at least 1 million plus, 1.5 million over the last 2 years. The question is how much of those are going to get cut? And that is one way you could sort of fight this counter-inflationary movement, is if you have a bunch of government workers that get laid off, that is a deflationary data point. And so it'll be interesting to see if, and it's a big if, whether the recommendations from the Doge, whatever it's called, the Department of Government, whatever efficiency or whatever it's called, whether those recommendations will actually get applied. But if they do, even if it's a small percentage, that does mean they're going to be reducing government employees versus raising them, and that is deflationary in the long run.
We've been on a government, and this is what I meant by the federal reality. Our economy has been a federal ran economy since COVID, and there's just no question the amount of money that came out and has been coming out is mind-blowing, along with all the jobs, everything else. And so it skews things wildly. So if they can do it, the hope is there's a great swap. And the swap is that it stops coming from the federal side and it starts coming from Main Street. So that all of a sudden, all this money and jobs creation, which when the federal government spends money, who does that go to? CEOs and owners. That's who it goes to. It does not go to the guy that's flipping hamburgers, right? Federal government spending moves through the system and goes to companies. It moves up the ladder and it gets soaked up in asset propping up assets, everything else. So when the federal government spends money, the rich get richer. And so this causes huge problems because everybody else is going, I don't get it. All those jobs, where are they? I'm not getting paid more, right? And all these people are like, oh, there's so much money. Everybody's making so much money. Where is it? And so I think that when we look at this period, if they could pull off the great swap, which I hope they can, I think we all hope and pray that they can, where you take $4 trillion out of one bucket and put it into a bucket that actually goes to people in salaries and spending and everything else, that would be incredible. I don't know if they can do it, but if we could get this transition, I think that'd be amazing.
Sorry, let me just share a quick share the graph here of the government employees. Now, to be fair, there obviously we did lose a lot of government employees during COVID, so there's a huge drop off there. If you're looking at the graph, this is a graph of employment in government from January 2013 to December 2023. You'll see a pretty big drop during the COVID, but then you can see the last 2 years, it is just spiked, and we're considerably higher now than we were pre-COVID. So we've got more government employees today than we did pre-COVID. But the last 2 years, I mean, has just been crazy. And so it'll be interesting to see if that gets reversed. Because we're not talking about slowing that down or even freezing hiring. We're literally talking about getting rid of these. So that graph, which is very rare, you start seeing that graph go down.
Well, here's the thing that we don't talk about enough, and I think we need to do a segment on this at some point. Today's not the day because I think this is a longer discussion. But if I asked you guys, government jobs, give me the top 3 categories of government jobs and like the proportion of employees in those jobs.
I mean, is the military considered, or are those just government
military,
contractors?
IRS, and administrative.
Okay, so you're actually very wrong. Basically, by far, 3 times more than any other profession, government employees are educators. And if you include higher education, public universities, it's basically 4 times as much. Number 2 is defense.
State versus Fed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's different when we're talking about the federal, because the states don't get the printing press. So it's not the same. When the federal government is hiring like that, we're talking state. If you want to talk state employees, absolutely, right? But when we're talking about the federal government, that's different.
So if you want to talk about federal, then defense is number 1. Hospitals and health are number 2. Postal service is number 3 at about 600,000. Police protection is number 4. So you have to go down pretty far. Natural resources is up there. But you got to go down pretty far before you're talking about just pure administrative people. And so I think this is a bigger discussion, but I think we kind of give a bad rap to, and in general, I think in general we give a bad rap to government employees. There are a lot of really important government employees out there that but obviously there's a lot of waste going on. We need to address it. But I think
it's that thing that we were looking at last week that I showed you that I did up. The federal government employs more people than the private sector of 34 states. Over half the states in the United States, private sectors are not only smaller, significantly smaller than the federal government's employees.
To circle back, something AJ said earlier that I think was kind of glossed over is the so what about all of this. And AJ nailed it when he was talking about the distribution of wealth. I actually, from an aside, and I just pulled this up because I honestly didn't have this prepared to talk about tonight. But if you look at the income distribution from 1989 to 2016, there was a study done with data from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis that in 1989, we had $7.12 trillion circulating and when you look at it in terms of socioeconomic class of how that broke down, 42% was middle class that held that wealth, 15% was low income, and 42% was the top 10% of income earners. Then fast forward to 2016, you took 42% of the top 10% in the US, and all of a sudden now they own 50% of the wealth. And the lower class though, just a second, the lower class now makes up 13% from 15%, and the middle class shrunk to 37%. But collectively, they now make up a significant piece of the pie. But what's most important about all of this is that in 2016, we went from 7.12 trillion in wealth to 12.88 trillion in wealth. So essentially what happens and this study showed is that the infusion of capital into the US economy benefits not only the top 10%, but to be honest with you, the top 1%. So it goes straight to the top. We have such a division. And you know who's losing? The mainstream media, once again, would like to have you believe that it's lower class, but it's essentially the middle class. And the middle class, it's like a magic show. It's like, look over here and we'll show you this is going on, but this is what we're doing behind the scenes. And the middle class is falling off a cliff. They will never be able to recover. And to be honest with you, in my personal belief, I feel like we're moving to a 2-party system and no one is recognizing it.
It's like the government printing press goes to the 1%. Every time government spending infuses the economy, it lifts up assets. The beneficiaries are asset and business owners. The money gets siphoned in. It goes to the top. All this money since COVID, where's it gone? Look at the wealth of the biggest corporations. Government printing ends up being protectionism. consolidation because of use of leverage, low interest rates, which large corporations and asset owners get the benefit. So how they print money and put it in the economy is done through leverage, right? Leverage benefits asset owners and businesses, which increases assets worth. The asset worth goes to the people that own the assets. Low interest rates allow them to borrow off it, turn that into real cash, and duplicate the system. So government printing of money is terrible for the middle class.
But even looking back at COVID, look at all the additional programs and benefits as a business owner that you could tap into the wealth or tap into the printing of the capital. It wasn't even the access to the capital. It's the knowledge that that class has to be able to deploy the capital and have it come back with friends. And that is the difference.
Yeah, I mean, all you have to do also as just pure unadulterated proof is look at AJ's private plane collection over the last several years. You'll see where all that wealth is really going.
You're not wrong. You want to know why? Because that was literally my investing thesis. The government's going to print money, and guess who gets it? And so we doubled down, and I invested and bought everything I could. And I leveraged up in 2008, 9, 10, 11, and 12 because the whole entire thesis was the government printing press makes asset owners wealthy, and they'll do it and they won't stop. So you just keep buying.
That's why you got to follow AJ Osborne at AJ Osborne on Instagram.
I was going to sum up this discussion, but I think I'm going to leave it there. I think, AJ, you summarized things really well. Okay. We've talked now.
You're going to keep going? I thought you were done.
I'm done. I'm moving on.
He's the moderator.
You're moving on. Thank God.
Sorry,
Okay,
put
good.
on my moderator hat.
Good. Sorry. Good. I thought you were going to continue your TED Talk for another 20 minutes, but good. Let's get to the main part of the show. Let's go.
We've talked about the economy. I think we can all agree that our future isn't just impacted by how much money we're making. Well, maybe it is, but what impacts how much money we're making is a lot of things. And when we see crazy stuff happening in society, it runs the risk of ultimately impacting our livelihoods in both good and bad ways. And speaking of crazy stuff happening in society, I'm guessing we and all of our listeners heard about the shooting in Manhattan last week, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare getting assassinated in cold blood. It not only captured the attention of Americans, but it's created a pretty big divide that seems like it could cause some major societal rifts over the coming months and years. So I'm going to throw this one over to Ashley. Ash, how do you think that what happened last week in terms of what happened with the shooting, what happened with why the shooting occurred? So the kind of the basis for why it happened in the first place, and what could potentially happen moving forward, both in the healthcare industry and bigger ramifications for society, class warfare, et cetera, et cetera. I know it's a big thing I'm throwing at you, but what are your thoughts on that and how it could impact us as investors?
So I have a lot to say about this, so I'm going to try to make this as succinct as possible. But essentially, like any broken system, we see the impact on the ground level. Ultimately, I think the insurance industry business model isn't working. It boils down to risk pooling and investing the float because those are the cornerstones of the insurance industry. And I think that just begs the question whether or not insurance companies are focused really on preventative and urgent care, or are they more focused on running a for-profit business? I think that focus matters because while it's sexy to say the insurance companies care about patients' health, to what degree? Like, it's no different than saying, I don't believe in stealing, but if stealing provides food for my starving child, I'm going to steal all day, to be honest with you. Brian Thompson, he made $10.2 million, I believe, as disclosed by the UnitedHealthcare in 2023. And to be honest with you, I actually don't have a problem with that. I have a problem that the fact that the American people, they don't have alternatives when it comes to healthcare coverage. I think the question we need to ask, does the industry need an overhaul? I think a program that potentially mirrors maybe our school system with both public and private sectors might be a potential solution. I know that system has its own issues, but I think providing basic level care, then a pay for additional services seems like it would significantly help. Before I get all of your input. I just wanted to share some crazy numbers that this situation has kind of spurred me into looking into, which, first of all, there is 220 billion with a B of medical care debt in the US. And that equates to impacting 100 million Americans, which is essentially 41% of American adults, 3 million of which owe more than $10,000 in medical debt. So when you look at the why behind it, it essentially comes out to being able to protect yourself, or insurance companies being able to protect themselves against medical malpractice payouts, because this is something that is very prevalent in the US compared to other countries around the world. And that is to the tune of a $3.57 billion exposure, with an average settlement of being over $300,000 per case. So when you look at those payouts, what does that leave the insurance companies? And one of the things that I found really interesting is that in 2023, publicly traded insurance companies in the US, actually, to exactly what AJ and all of us were just talking about, was a 10.4% increase in revenue, which was over $1 trillion in profit. And specifically, when we look at UnitedHealthcare Group, because that is obviously the hottest topic of the hour, they made 41 billion in the industry made 41 billion in profits, with UnitedHealthcare making 20 billion in that same year. AJ, I know that you have worked in this industry. You probably know it best out of all of us on this show. Just wondering, like, what are your thoughts? Because I obviously have potentially a very differing opinion than you do, since you worked in the industry.
And I want to frame this conversation kind of specifically for AJ. You can go any way you want with it, AJ, but I do want to kind of start with a question. Has anything changed? I mean, certainly things with the healthcare industry, what we've seen over the last week, just with the uprising and the social commentary, which I think has surprised a lot of people. Maybe it hasn't surprised people. I don't know. You might think that a lot of things have changed with healthcare in the recent past, and that's causing issues. But have things changed, or has it just been building for a long time?
So there's a few things that I think are really interesting. First of all, the American healthcare system is wildly unproductive. I mean, like, mind-numbing. It is inefficient. It is fundamentally broken. Now, with that said, America is a socialized healthcare system, because we have more people that do not pay for private insurance than we do not. So the America, when you look at people that go in for medical care, getting government, as well as not even getting paid, it tops 50%, 55, something 60%, and it actually has for a long time. It's well over. The private sector of healthcare in the United States is less by far than the government. So we are a socialized healthcare system, if you look at just the numbers. Now, the over 93% of Americans have healthcare coverage. When we look at the healthcare system, there's a lot of problems with it. But insurance companies, right? It's not like I'm for insurance companies or not. I actually spent a career, $800 million of corporate premium fighting insurance companies. That's what I did. I worked with clients, and I worked against the insurance company to reduce cost. All we did, we took them out of the insurance care, and we created private insurance out of their groups. We self-funded their own dollars so they could not go through insurance companies. So when we did this, right, and we would do this once again to companies all over the United States, we're talking, beyond tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees, we did and worked on this. And it was always this really hard thing to do. Now, a lot of people think if I don't use an insurance company, we're better off. If we didn't have insurance companies, we'd be better off. So first of all, let's talk about that. That's what we did. We got rid of insurance companies, right? That's not fundamentally true. The insurance companies' margins are not big at all. There is savings to certain companies, but not all of them. In fact, some companies, they can't leave insurance companies because they actually would lose money. The insurance companies are subsidizing everything. So some companies would be like, no, if you don't go with this insurance company, you're done. Like, they're subsidizing you. Other ones, we would move off and we would instigate a whole bunch of claims analysis and we would look at the system try to work. The problem becomes a few things. In the United States, one of the biggest problems that we have with insurance and our medical care resides solely in this. Let me share my screen so everybody can see what's going on. The average insurance company has a 3% margin. So to put this in, the UnitedHealthcare guy that killed got shot, right? The guy that shot him's family's worth more than him by a long shot. They're so much richer than him. Like, it's crazy, in fact. That's the funny thing actually about this, because people thought it was like this. It's not. He came from a family that was far wealthier than this guy is and will be. And so when we look and you go, all right, it's not that he was wealthy and it's not like this guy was wealthy or whatnot. That wasn't a part of it. It comes down to not only coverage. Here, let me go right here.
Can I throw out something just real quick as just devil's advocate? Because we as investors often talk about the fact that we don't write the laws, especially tax laws and development laws. And it's our job as investors and entrepreneurs to basically use the laws to our advantage to try and make as much money as we can. We look for the loopholes. We look for the places where we can take advantage of what other people are defining, what Congress is defining, and state governments are defining. And we figure out how to use those rules to our advantage to make as much money as possible. Devil's advocate argument is insurance companies are doing the exact same thing. Congress has decided how our healthcare coverage and system in this country is going to work. And the healthcare companies, you can call them greedy bastards, you can call them assholes, but at the end of the day, they're doing exactly what the rest of us do, which is we try and I mean, it's different because they have lives in their hands. We do to much lesser extent, but to the same degree, I mean, they're trying to use the system to make money just like the rest of us are.
And two, the most of the money, guess where insurance companies make their money? Guess how they make money?
It's on the float.
It's on the float.
My issue, though, Jay, is that it's different because there is a direct impact on people's lives. 1 in 5 people who have medical debt, that impacts their housing situation. Not only do I see this firsthand in the multifamily industry because they can't get approved for apartments, but this translates into they either have to live with family members, other living situations, and ultimately homelessness. And what I think is not being captured here is where's the data on leading to depression, mental health issues, inability to not only get housing, but transportation because this impacts their credit score before they even have an opportunity to build a credit score. I mean, there are so many like residual impact due to medical debt that, yes, I agree that essentially the insurance industry is just using the tax code and government legislation to help be profitable in the US. I get all of that, but I think human nature doesn't allow us to trust the fact that the majority of people are going to act in an ethical way when it comes to making a profit over someone's livelihood, especially if they can't see the direct impact. If it's an indirect impact, it's too much of an arm's length away for them to make decisions that govern their industry and their particular business that I think is the right way to go about it. I mean, if there is a lot of speculation on why, I think his name's Luigi or whatever his name is, that moved forward with this murder. And there's one strong argument that they found this kind of rhetoric that he posted about his mother and this, precipitating issue that she was having with respect to her legs. And ultimately, I think that when you just have this constant drag on, not on yourself personally, but how it impacts your overall family and livelihood, that matters.
It
That
does,
really
but here's
matters.
the problem. His mother was so freaking wealthy. She could have taken a private jet to any country in the world, but America has the best healthcare in the world. It's just not affordable. And it's not affordable because of this.
But would it have been different though if she couldn't have done that?
It would have been in the public's eyes, but that's the point. The public. So we're drawing a conclusion that doesn't exist. That's not true. She could do anything she wanted. She could have taken 2 private jets and done
But
it.
let me play devil's advocate again, because I don't disagree with you, Ash, that medical debt and the whole the way healthcare is in this country leads to a lot of people being in really bad situations, including homelessness. But what else leads to homelessness? Not paying your rent and getting evicted. But as a landlord, do you say, I'm not going to evict somebody because that's going to cause family issues and mental health issues and make them homeless? No, it's capitalism. And at the end of the day, the government's writing the rules and we're following them as business people, and we can feel bad about doing it.
Well, let me push back on the government. Let me push back on that because I just pulled it up. I mean, who do you think are the largest lobbyists in Washington?
Healthcare industry.
Yeah, the healthcare industry tops the top 4 out of 5. And so they're
But
in
the
there.
healthcare industry isn't insurance. This is the problem, you guys, we get into.
No, it's pharma. It is 100% pharma. I came from
It's a whole bunch of things. It's pharma, it's actual medical device. Because when we look at our healthcare system, our administrative cost. So I'm going to show you something. This is going to blow everybody's mind. You can see right here, since 1975, what has happened. The administrative growth has gone up 3,500%. The physician growth hasn't even gone up 100%. Now, look at this. When you look at us, you go, okay, well, that's fine. Well, what about though? What about in a comparison, right? Is that normal? Is that not normal? Well, that really becomes the question. And when you look at the rest of the world, the United States has the highest administrative cost, not by a little. You're talking 3-4 times. So our healthcare system is vastly bloated. To say bloated, it's an understatement. And this is driving huge amounts of cost.
I think I come at it from a different perspective because I've experienced it, even though I am an American. When Kyle was playing and he was overseas, I was pregnant. And I delivered in the US, but we didn't at the time, I believe, if I remember correctly, we didn't at the time have US health coverage because we were living in Europe. Long story short is we essentially found out what it would cost for me to deliver under health insurance versus paying out of pocket. Paying out of pocket was $14,000. If I went through a health insurance provider, it was 50.
Yeah,
That's the problem.
That's exactly. And I was going to tell a couple of stories because that's from an anecdotal standpoint, I've heard it, but I've heard pharmacists literally tell people like, "Hey, look, I've got a product that I literally," and these numbers are rough, but it's literally the idea is, I have a product. The pharmacist says, I have a product that costs me $2. I want to sell it for $4 to the patient. But as soon as the patient tells me that they have insurance, they have to, by contract, by law, charge $15 to the patient. And then the patient has to pay like a $6 copay. So their out-of-pocket copay is more expensive than if they bought cash. And I've got the same anecdotal evidence myself when I go and offer to pay, like especially on dental, when you just pay cash, it actually, there's a dual system. There's a cash system if you pay cash, and then there's an insurance system. And that bloatedness, I'm not sure that's a verb, but that increase in cost is because there's to your point, AJ, it's an inefficient system. Now, I don't know if it's what the cause of the inefficiency is. It the fact that we have malpractice, which Ashley brought a great point. Like obviously that's a cost. The legal system in the United States is completely different from the rest of the world. You can sue anybody for anything, and it's not too many places in the world have contingency fee attorneys who will take on cases for free and only take a percentage. So all of those are factors. So I don't know who's responsible, but to say that the system is inefficient, the fact that you can pay cheaper if you can afford it, to pay cash versus going through an insurance company, I think says volumes.
Well, this is very dependent because lots of times that's not true. So like if you have like medical, so for most of my meds that I have to, if I have to pay cash, we're talking a $9 medication cost me $250. Now, what happens is hospitals, if you pay cash, they will give you huge discounts. Why will they give you huge discounts if you pay cash? It's not because it's cash. It's because if not, you won't pay them. So they write it off. Where they know the insurance companies have to by law. So when insurance companies got involved, when regulation started going up, a huge percentage of the regulation or the administration is to deal with insurance companies, and hospitals mark up 15x because the insurance companies have to pay it by law. Insurance companies cannot go in and say not.
How inefficient is that?
It's horrible.
Here's my hypothesis. I believe that if you let all the Democrats go and write a healthcare bill where the Republicans weren't allowed to stop them from doing whatever they wanted. They could do whatever they thought was right. Or you let all the Republicans go and write a healthcare bill where the Democrats couldn't stop them from doing whatever they wanted to do. Basically, if you didn't have this gridlock in Congress where each side basically wanted to sabotage the other side's success, my hypothesis is it would not be difficult, maybe not to create the greatest healthcare system in the world. I don't give anybody in Congress on either side credit for being able to do that. But I think even some dumb people in Congress on either side of the aisle could figure out how to create a system that is 10 times more efficient than what it is today. But we have all of this gridlock where if Democrats say, I want to pass something, Republicans say, hell no, I'm not going to let you do that. Or if Republicans say, I've got this great idea, Democrats say, I don't care how good it is, I'm not letting you pass it. You're not going to get inefficiencies. And everybody's just trying to get these little incremental changes. And we all know that little incremental changes isn't going to fix it.
But again, I think the lobby, again, AJ, you've got the data more than I am. You're saying the lobbying is more healthcare in general, not necessarily insurance companies. But when you have the healthcare industry lobbying the Congress folks, and that makes it an impact. So
the healthcare industry does not want costs to go down. So we've gotten to a point where we're like, insurance companies are the bad guys, but our doctor who makes 4 to 10 times what any other doctor in the world makes, he's good. We have physicians in America, our physicians. So if you're a specialist, your average income is between $800,000 and $1.5 million. Do you know what it is in other countries? 100,000, maybe? So you have a system, you guys, like the healthcare system does not want lower cost. It doesn't. The weird thing, though, is guess how the insurance companies would make more money? If more people signed up. They actually want people on. The higher the cost of insurance goes, guess what happens? They lose people. We take them off their plan and we go and we move it to their own subsidized system. If you could take basically every company in America, right, that's over 10,000 people is self-funded at this point.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. Part of the problem is that when healthcare costs get too expensive, who are the first people to say, I'm not going to opt in, I'm going to go without healthcare? It's young people who don't cost the system anything. Basically,
they are the ones that offset the sick.
To offset that risk.
Exactly.
And so it's a we call this we have a term for in insurance. It's a death knell, by the way. And the United States has been in it. What happens is you have adverse selection, meaning that when healthcare costs get good, the bad ones take it, the good ones don't, and that is anti-healthcare. And the government too is set up and impose rules. This is so regulated, it's wild. Like the government regulates everything to do with insurance. Like
if I can add one other example to what AJ is saying, because to be honest with you, I also came from the healthcare industry prior to getting into real estate. And I worked for 3 of the top pharma companies in the entire world, and I worked in clinical R&D. And I will never forget being at Wyeth, which is now owned by Pfizer, the head of R&D giving a presentation and talking about what the life cycle looks like for a drug to come to market. And essentially, it takes on average, now this is data from 2014 and it's specific to this company, but essentially it takes 16 years. And over that duration, based off of, I think it was 2014's data or 2013's data, $1.6 billion. So essentially, they need the patents because the likelihood of a drug coming to market is so rare. And not only that, if you look at in terms of the profile of the drugs and medical devices that are coming to market, obviously the ones that came to market right away were the low-hanging fruit. So now we're dealing with rare disease, very complicated viruses and illnesses. That takes more money in terms of doing the groundwork of clinical trials, which is the field that I worked in. And that takes more money. So that all translates into having lobbyists lobby for these pharma companies to have more protection. And more protection translates into longer patents, less generics, less options and alternatives, and cheaper pricing for the consumer. And then along with that goes with the offset on the insurance company. So going back to my original story where I was talking about the cost when I was delivering paying out of pocket versus paying out of the insurance company, one of the things that they said to me is when you pay through an insurance company, we barter. It's a barter system. So I don't know, AJ, if you know like that aspect of it, what the average barter ends up yielding, like, but I know that's another like very antiquated system that we have that's wrapped into this whole situation too.
Well, and two, there's a huge crux of this that we have to hit on that nobody ever talks about. And it actually drives me bonkers. And you probably know this better than anybody, but we subsidize the healthcare of every country in the world. Our costs are overinflated due to the fact that, get this, guys, this number, it's wild. It drives me nuts because Americans, we front the cost of this. 53% of all medicines in the world were produced in America. Wait, 30% are directly imported and made by American companies. 17% are produced in other countries, but they are made from American companies. We make 80% of all the drugs in the world. All of them, all the innovation, all the vaccine. Like this all comes from America. And our drug costs are to a tune of 5 times more than the other countries. So if you go to England, the cost for England to get meds is 10 times less than America. And you want to know why? Because we cannot, by law, have collective bargaining. We can't do it.
There's another aspect too, AJ. The other aspect to it is the fact that the FDA recognizes only trials that are conducted in the US. So the other piece of the puzzle is that when you are creating or bringing to market a drug and you have to go through all of these different phases of trial to get a product on market, in the US, we rarely will take another country's data and allow it to be of impact, or the FDA will approve it to manufacture it in the US or produce it in the US. We have to replicate trials. Unlike the EMA, which is the European governing body that's equivalent to the FDA, and other governing bodies across the entire world that recognize clinical trials. So all of those years of data, all of the costs associated with it has to be replicated in the US, but the rest of the world will take it as Bible.
And two, we cannot protect our drugs. We have the cost here, but it goes over. So we make 70% plus of all the life-saving drugs. 40% of the entire world's medical equipment comes from the good old US of A. Like military, everybody, we subsidize your guys' medical cost because we have to make it, produce it, invent it. The R&D, everything like that, that comes from us. How do we subsidize it? Through insurance. So if you cut out the cost, and this is a reality nobody wants to talk about, if you make insurance, take it away, I don't care, whatever, insurance doesn't matter. If you make medical costs cheaper in the United States, cut it in half. Oh, government's going to pay for it, right? Where do the 70+% of all medicines and 40% of the medical equipment that the world uses to save lives now come from? Because the only incentives that these guys have and why they all do it here, including foreign investors and everything else, is because you can invest $1 billion into a drug. So this system, while it taxes us grossly, other countries make fun of us for our medical cost while they take our drugs and use all our medical equipment, and their doctors went to school in the United States. So we are subsidizing the world. In fact, if you looked at the subsidizing from our military to Europe, that alone covers, guess what? Their medical cost. If they had to replace their military for what we do, that alone takes out their entire socialized medicine. It doesn't exist. They can't afford it. So we subsidize them in two ways. Military, and it all comes from us. All of it. This is important because I think it gets to a crux that you just can't cut out all the cost and get the same outcome. All of this life-saving stuff that's happened in the world, we've extended people's lives by, huge amounts of margin. Our quality of life and health, everything's better. The vast majority of this derived, created, originated, invented in the United States. So the cost burden is also, though, on us. It is a completely not fair system. And I think that our lawmakers need to start going, why in the world do other countries get our drugs that we had to invent? It cost them $1 billion to make. They're not going to get it from other countries because they can buy it at 1/10. So who pays for it? Americans. We pay for the world's medical system. And that's just true. And it's wrong and not fair. And in order to subsidize the cost, administrative goes up and the healthcare system we pay ungodly amounts to them. It's ridiculous. But there is no way that you can just say, we're going to cut out 50% of the cost and not have a corresponding result. We have the best healthcare in the world. It's just the most unaffordable. So this problem is, if you want it to be affordable, will not only we still have the best healthcare in the world, but the rest of the world won't. And I'm not saying this with an answer, but it's a reality that everybody looks at and says that insurance company that makes a 3% margin is the reason my healthcare costs are expensive. I'm not agreeing with insurance companies. The denial of claims is crazy. Absolutely maddening. It's wrong. It's sick. I fought against these people. I literally fought to get claims approved. But if you think that the insurance company is why your medical costs are so high, get rid of every insurance company in the world. Your medical costs are not going down.
Bringing this back though, I just have one quick question for all of us, because Kyle and I have debated this since this shooting massacre, whatever you want to call it, has happened. Do you think, just from a poll, we don't have to dissect this, but do you think that this is going to be a catalyst for change within the insurance agency or insurance industry? Obviously, the Closet is getting to me.
Change the information they let out. That's it.
You don't think the insurance industry is going to change? Jay, what do you think?
Reminds me a lot of 2011 Occupy Wall Street. It was the last time I can remember when a lot of people came together from both sides. It was mostly on the left, but there were plenty of people on the right that came together as well in a fight that was not based on race or politics or religion or country of origin. It was based on class. And I think I remember 2011 really well, thinking, okay, this is going to change the world. This is going to create class warfare that's going to last decades and is going to lead to the equivalent of the French Revolution here in the US. And what happened was it lasted, 59 days, I think it was.
And the banks got bigger.
Yeah, the protests, and then it dissipated. And so this is the first time that I've seen in 14 years, something that's like a class type warfare, that it feels like we're on the cusp of something scary. But if history is an indication, it's very likely to just fizzle.
And Mauricio, what's your opinion?
I've been on Nutcracker season. I've not been following the specifics of the shooting very much, so I don't really. I mean, I do feel like that this CEO that got brutally assassinated. I mean, he's. I think it's just the symbol, right? I don't think there was him specifically targeted. So it's really the symbol. He kind of represents the whole right or wrong. To your point, AJ, he's just the insurance guy, one of the insurance guys, right or wrong. But they're kind of making him the symbol of the insurance and health industry, and so by targeting him, you're just targeting the health insurance as a whole. But whether this is going to change anything, I don't know if I have really an opinion, because I don't have my pulse on what's been going on.
Ash, I'll let you round it out.
Yeah, I'm going to go on record right now and say that you all totally are missing the mark on the fact that almost every single media or social media commentator that's a woman is talking about the attractiveness. And just like an attractive woman can make massive change in an industry, I think you guys are forgetting the fact that this guy is like a heartthrob to single women that are jumping on the train, talking about what's going on. And a lot of people are really talking about this entire situation. I personally think we're going to look back and we are going to say that he was the person who was the catalyst that changed. And I think, to be honest with you, it just comes down to the fact that he is attractive. He's well educated. He went to UPenn. He has a good point that he's making. I mean, I think people are on the fence on whether or not he's actually crazy. It's going to be interesting to see.
I mean, he shot somebody in the middle of the street.
Yeah, I hope that's not true, because I mean, I don't want to be condoning that if you disagree. Yeah, if you disagree with a particular position, that it's time that you want to encourage. And I'm not saying you are, but like, I don't want to have that position where if you believe something, that you're going to go encourage somebody to, like. I just think the whole idea of condoning, or not condoning, like just supporting.
I'm not condoning, by the way. I'm not condoning, and I'm not.
We need to make that very clear.
I just think that it's important to recognize the fact that there are a lot of people. There's an angle of which that speaks to his entire history, like the what you're getting as a package, right? You're getting a package of a person who is a young, well-educated, attractive person who's making a stance on an industry that I don't think there's a single person in the entire country who hasn't been impacted or witnessed medical insurance not covering a claim that should have been covered.
100%. But I'm going to push back. I know we got to move on. I'm going to push back on that, because the one thing I did, we talked about it before we came on. I haven't been paying attention at all, and I just literally plugged in today because I knew we were going to talk about it. And he does look like he comes from an Ivy school. He's well educated. He's good looking, all that stuff. So I was thinking, like, maybe, like, I'm curious to see what the news was saying about whether they got the wrong guy. Because I mean, it doesn't seem like to fit the profile. Like, what's going on? And then I saw the arrest video today, and he's lost it. So I mean, he is definitely, there's a mental health issue. So when you say he's well educated, but something snapped on this guy. Because if you're well educated and you don't go out and grab whatever this pistol was, which is a unique gun anyway, and go assassinate someone. That's not an act of somebody who just believes really strongly in something. Somebody who's just lost it. I think there's a mental breakdown, to be honest. I think that's going to be his number one defense.
Let me cut it off there. Let me summarize with one. We don't know. He hasn't been found guilty of anything. So let's be careful about presuming guilt. I just want to take the Mauricio stance of let's be safe and not accuse him of anything. I've certainly heard reports that like he lived in the woods for a few weeks before this happened, and he was complaining of brain fog, and he just had recent back surgery, and so very possible that there were mental issues involved. I will finalize this with one comment towards Ashley that if it really boiled down to just looks, this podcast would be the number one podcast in the world.
I agree 100%. Like,
and so
we would have already
guys are
changed
hanging-
America.
I think you guys are hanging your hat on the fact that I said looks when I'm just talking about the fact that that does impact things, that it impacts things because people pay attention when someone's attractive, whether it's a woman or a man. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. I'm not trying to say that it's
That's why you're on here and Kyle's not. We got
Exactly.
it. We trust us. We know. We're like, Kyle, you're gone. She's not. She's on every single podcast from now on. It's the only way we're going to make it.
Okay, so lot to unpack there. I think we could probably do a whole other segment on the societal impact of this and what's gonna happen. But we're on record that Ash is saying it's going to be a big deal and it's gonna have ripple effects down the road. And the three of us are naive and we think it's going to blow over. So I guess we can come back next year and check out our predictions.
When I'm invited once a year to be on the show.
There you go. You can come back. You're invited anytime you want.
You're a new host.
Kick your husband off anytime you want. I do want to touch on one other topic this week. We'll make this one quick. But rumor has it, Mauricio, that the Corporate Transparency Act, CTA, this thing that basically required us to file like dozens, at least in my case, dozens of pieces of paperwork with FinCEN telling you about all my companies. I heard that there was some lawsuit and court judgment that may say that we don't need to file anymore. I don't know what's going on. Can you give us the brief update of what's going on, and do we still need to file before the end of the year, and what should we do even if we don't have to?
Yeah, I'll be super brief because, it's not rumor, it's fact that, December 2nd, I think it was, there was a district court in Texas that actually struck down the law as unconstitutional. But what was different about this particular ruling by the Texas judge is that he made it an injunction nationwide. So there's already been a couple of other courts that have found this unconstitutional, but it's been limited to not only the people in the state, but also the plaintiffs in that particular case. But this particular judge made a preliminary injunction, basically staying the entire thing for the entire country. And then just so that there's no doubt, the government came out and acknowledged that, and the government themselves have now officially said that you do not have to comply with the Corporate Transparency Act. Just so everybody remembers, you had an obligation to file something by the end of this year. If you had a bunch of entities, LLCs, corporations from prior years, you had till December 31st to file all this information with the government. And if you have a new entity this year, you had 90 days. That's all stayed. I want to read to you briefly because it's literally 2 sentences long. The FinCEN official statement says, in light of a recent federal court order, reporting companies are not currently required to file beneficial ownership information with FinCEN and are not subject to liability if they fail to do so while the order remains in force. However, reporting companies may continue to voluntarily submit beneficial ownership information reports if you'd like. So if you want to continue to give them information, you can. But the government appealed. 2 days later, they actually appeal. So it's on appeal. So it may get overturned on appeal, but until that happens, don't worry about the Corporate Transparency Act. It's actually one of my, well, I don't want to spoil it. It actually was one of my predictions, but we're going to do a prediction show here pretty soon. So I'll back off on the prediction. But there's no doubt, do not worry about the Corporate Transparency Act. No matter what somebody tells you, you do not have to file, but you do have to pay attention to the fact that this may get overturned. So we don't know what is going to happen in appeal, but as of right now, do not file any Corporate Transparency Act beneficial information for any of your entities, whether you file them this year or in the past.
So what happens if on January 12th, this gets overturned and we haven't filed? Will we have some grace period where we can still file? Or are they going to say, nope, you have to file within 3 minutes or you're getting fined?
That's a good question. I don't know obviously they can't retroactively have you file retroactively so everybody's illegal. I mean, my guess is they'll just give you a 90-day grace period, but I'm guessing at that. I don't know how that's going to work. I actually don't believe I think the whole thing's going to get dropped, but it's going to take a while. I mean, there's an appeal. People have to file briefs. There's responses. There's a process. So it'll take a while to come through, but definitely pay attention. Make sure you're subscribed to the show because I'm sure as soon as something does happen, we will bring it up here on The Drunk Real Estate podcast.
Okay.
With-
So
featuring
apparently-
Ashley Wilson, Badass Investor.
apparently, as moderator, I have another responsibility.
Oh no, you're not. You have the responsibility to skip the top 10.
Nope, I'm going to do it real quick.
No, you
I
got to
actually-
skip the top 10.
I'm going to do it really quick. I think
Top
it's
10
interesting.
lobbyists in the healthcare industry. Is that what you're
I'm
doing?
actually going to do the top 10 pharmaceutical drugs by sales in 2023. And I'm not even going to name most of them because I can't read most of them. It's like number 10 is Opdivo, and then Stelara, then
Hey, I take Stelara. Dude, don't give me that. I take Stelara. That's one
you
of my
take
drugs.
Stelara, and so that's Crohn's disease.
You seem
That's
like
right.
you would.
I take Stelara.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, well, there you go. Well, Stelara in 2023 generated nearly $11 billion in sales, and that was number 9 drug on the list.
But do you know how much money I spend on the Stelara shots, to AJ's point?
Given that they made $11 billion in 2023, I'm guessing a lot.
I spend $5 a shot.
Oh,
Well, Mauricio, I am the official spokesperson, and they wanted me to tell you that you have been inducted into the Jelly of the Month Club.
So anyway, we've got some drugs for HIV, eczema. We've got a drug for macular degeneration. You have to get up to number, let's see, you have to get up to number 5 before there's a drug that you recognize, or I recognize. Ozempic is number 5.
How is that not
Semaglutide.
number
new.
1?
It's not. It's number 5.
Remind me, for some of the idiots, for those of us that don't take drugs like you guys, what is that drug specifically?
It is a diabetes drug.
Wait a second.
Yeah. Who said we take it?
Mauricio lives in California.
And you don't know what this drug is?
And
They
you
hand it
don't
out on
know
the
what
streets.
Ozempic is?
I
I'm
know.
losing
What does it
weight,
do?
but I'm
Does
doing
does
it. I'm
make
doing
me
it the
lose weight?
natural way.
Does it make me drink as much alcohol as I want and not wake up with a hangover? If that's the case, I want it.
It is a diabetes drug that apparently helps you lose weight, and I'm doing it the natural way. So we'll see. Hopefully, I never have to take it. So then number 4 is a rheumatoid arthritis drug. Then we get into
This is like the worst top 10 we've ever done. I want to go on record and say this is the worst top 10 that's ever been done on the show. I want to go on record.
I think the key is
I've never
there are
seen
a lot of drugs
I've
out
never seen a host stumble through a top 10 ever in the 83 episodes.
there are a
that
lot
we've
of.
ever done.
My point is that 9 out of the 10.
Yeah, what is your point?
I'm getting there. 9 out of 10, except for you, Mauricio, who is taking a Crohn's drug. 9 out of 10, most people would never have heard of. Number 1 on the list is a cancer drug, Keytruda, that has had over $25 billion in sales in 2023.
Wow.
I really wish Kyle would have come back to do the top 10 because that would have been way better. If
How
he'd
many
done
of
it.
those are painkillers?
None.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so it's everything from rheumatoid arthritis to HIV to.
Does that include the illicit drugs, though? I mean, if you add like marijuana and cocaine into that, I'm sure that'll top the list.
I'm sure that probably blows those out of the water. Okay. So there's our top 10. I don't have any games unless you guys have a game you
Breaking
want to play.
news, fentanyl just came top drug.
Top one.
But only for another 2 months.
You know what the top 10 should have been? I just realized the top 10 should have been the top 10 Conference Connect speakers of 2024.
That's a good one. How about number 1? Who's the number 1 Conference Connect speaker?
Cody Sanchez.
AJ, votes?
AJ, who do you think?
Who do you think?
Is it us?
Is it us?
It will be after you send out that email you and I were
That's right.
connecting on.
Exactly right.
It will be you. But for now.
Okay, I'm not going to let that be your plug, Ash. So we'll do you last. So Mauricio, give us a plug, and I hope I know what yours is.
Well, I'm launching my syndication legal coaching program. For those of you who don't know, I actually left Premier Law Group, the company I founded 20 years ago. My amazing former partner, Bethany, took that over, bought me out, which is amazing. So I am launching am launching tomorrow my syndication legal coaching program. I way oversubscribed on the beta launch, but I'm going to officially launch in January. So if you're interested, if you're a syndicator out there, want to get some coaching from me, I don't have anything set up. So maybe just comment. Actually, go to Instagram, follow me on Instagram, and just message me, coach. or just drop a comment here on YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, just message me, coach, and I will send you some info if you're interested.
Awesome. AJ.
I'm going to go with I was going to go with our newsletter because it's so awesome, everybody. Like, seriously, DRE Daily. Like, I plugged it last week. I'm plugging it again because it's awesome, and you guys need to sign up for it.
I appreciate it. I'm gonna do DRE Daily as well. That's our daily economics newsletter. I'm pretty impressed that over the last 6 weeks we average over 62% open and read rate. We've never had in 6 weeks. We've never had under 60%. Since we've launched the newsletter, there's only been one day under 60%. It was 59.9, which I'm going to convince some people to go back and read that from 7 weeks ago, just so we can get over 60% on every single one. And we're giving away a DRE, a Drunk Real Estate mug engraved with your name if you're the 1,000th subscriber. So go to dredaily.com. And I'm going to let Miss Ashley Wilson wrap this one up.
So here's the situation. The situation is that Kyle normally plugs me. But as you all know, Kyle has pneumonic.
So there'll be no plugging tonight. Is that what you're saying?
No, I guess I'm going to have to plug myself.
Wow.
So
that's awesome. Let's plug it.
I will plug myself by saying you need to sign up for both, because I like a double plug, both Conference Connect and DRE Daily.
ConferenceConnect.com, dredaily.com.
And I am not just saying this. DRE Daily is something I read every single day. And I promise you, I'm not just saying that. I read it every single day. It is incredible. I highly recommend signing up for DRE Daily.
Wow. Thank you. Okay. I want you to finish out the show. Are you going to do it, or do I need to do it?
I have no idea how to finish out the show. I haven't listened to this.
Never actually made it through an entire episode. There we go. She's now proven. Okay. For Mauricio, AJ, and Ashley, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next Tuesday.
See you guys.